So, hello, everyone, and welcome back to the New Jersey Youth Talks Back podcast. My name is Jay, our host for the series, and today we have a very special guest, Dr. Jessica Hamilton, the director of the Hamilton Lab at Rutgers, where she also works as an assistant professor. The topic for today is deep diving into mental health. So, let's get right into the discussion.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. And I also want to introduce my assistant to the lab director. This is Bruce, my dog. So he'll probably come in and out of the screen, but just wanted you to know.
Awesome. So, Dr. Hamilton, you started working at Rutgers in 2021, correct?
Yes, I did. I joined in January 2021 remotely for the first about 8 months or so.
Nice, nice. And how was the transition between remote and virtual as an assistant professor?
Yeah, it was interesting. I think, you work so hard for so long, and I'm sure this is a relatable experience for many teens and college students. And then, you're finally an assistant professor and starting your first day of my first real, big girl job. And I walked down the hall from my room to my home office, where I am now. And it was a little anticlimactic, and it was a little hard to, get started to honestly, get to know my colleagues, the students in the program. I didn't actually get to my office for I think about 5 or 6 months, and we didn't have furniture in the lab for, oh man, like a year or so. So it was rough, but it was nice too to kind of have ease in a little bit to getting started.
Nice, nice. So your research focuses on identifying modifiable risk factors for the onset and worsening of adolescent depression and suicidality. Can you tell us a little bit more, give us a little bit more depth about your research and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So ultimately, my research is focused on trying to identify, what are some of the key factors that ultimately lead to young people, feeling more depressed, having thoughts about suicide, and then engaging in, having a suicide attempt or dying by suicide. So ultimately, we're really trying to figure out, what are those things that identify, what's happening in the moment, and then ideally what we can do then to prevent those things from happening or to reduce the kind of onset of them from happening at all or when they get really bad. So that's really like the big picture of our research, is to understand, what are those things. When we say modifiable, it's like there's a lot of things that ultimately contribute to depression and suicidal thoughts, and we really want to identify things that we can change or things that we can actually make, programs at hopefully in schools and things like that at a broader level, so that we can actually change this thing and actually improve mental health and well-being in teens.
Nice, nice. So, can you tell us about some of the work you do, or did? I'm not, my research wasn't that well into this perspective, but you worked with the NIMH. Can you tell us a little bit about that work, and also what the NIMH is?
Yeah, so the National Institute of Mental Health, or NIMH, ultimately they are kind of the largest funding body in kind of the United States specifically, and they fund mental health focused research. And so they've actually been kind of the biggest funder of most of the studies that I've worked on when I was a graduate student at Temple University in Philly, and then also when I was a postdoc at the University of Pittsburgh, out in Pittsburgh, the other side of the state in Pennsylvania. And now I actually was fortunate to receive what's called a career development award, which is something where you're an early career, researcher, just really getting started and building my lab from the ground up. And they're funding my research study, which is called the Pathways Linking Use of Social Media to Teen Outcomes. And so that's where my work right now has been focusing a lot on understanding. We think about things that we can change or better understand to improve. Social media and sleep are two of those big things that we focus on. And so I just want to say real quick that in this work, we're not villainizing social media or saying that that is the cause of any of these bad things from happening, but we know that it is a big part of teens' lives. And so our role of our research is really to better understand it, and especially when it can be linked to sleep disruption or getting, not enough or poor sleep, and then thinking about that in kind of more immediate pathways for mental health.
So in your study, how do you guys go about, accessing and using the information and the data that you collect?
Yeah, great question. This is actually an ongoing challenge that we're facing. We're in this research study, we're using some kind of newer methods. So one of those methods is called smartphone sensing. And so basically, like your phone has kind of sensors built into it, right? So your phone knows if it's on or off, it knows if it's charging, right? The time, Wi-Fi. But for us, one of those key sensors is called like the application foreground. And so your phone is just regularly recording information about, what apps you're using, how often you're kind of opening and closing them, how much you're on any given app. And so we use an application called Aware that we have teens, put on their phones, and it does not capture anything about what they're doing on the apps. It just tells us whether that app was opened or closed, and then kind of how long they're using it and when. And so for us, one thing we're looking at is just kind of patterns of social media use. And then, of course, in addition to like objective things like that, or like, screen time, which is just one component of social media, it's so important to understand like individuals' experiences. So we ask multiple times a day, about 3 times a day for the total of the study period, which is 2 months, what experiences you're having on social media. Is it making you feel good or bad? And kind of different scenarios. So for example, how bad did you feel today? In terms of not feeling like you're good enough or feeling like you're as good as other kids. And so that would be an example of a negative experience someone might have on social media, that we're asking about multiple times. And we also ask, are you feeling inspired or uplifted by something you saw on social media? And so we're looking at that, multiple times a day as well. And ideally kind of putting those pieces together to really better understand a bigger picture. Of course, it's not the whole picture, but it's a part of the picture that we're trying to understand.
So when you and Bruce go about, building this information and you have your picture, what can you do with that information to better adolescents and understanding their use of social media, and what else comes out of that data?
Yeah, thank you so much for like asking that question and diving deeper with me into this, because it's what's ultimately what we're trying to do, and I think this actually speaks to just a broader conversation that's happening in the news right now, is the media and a lot of adults are villainizing social media, and in fact, legislation has just passed, in several states or in one state in particular, saying that okay, teens can't have social media until they're age 18, without parental consent. And even if they get their parents to agree for them to use it, they're also saying that parents have the right to access all of their private information and content, that they're viewing on social media. And so, one of the things we want to understand, and I think just taking a step back, one of the things that's happening is like that legislation like that and policies that are being made around social media aren't based on actual science yet. There's some science looking at this, but a lot of it is based on what we call cross-sectional research, which is like, I'm going to give you a single survey at a time point, and we're going to correlate, how well you're feeling and how much you're using social media right now. And that can give us some information, but it doesn't tell us how these things are really maybe moving together. And that maybe when someone's not feeling, good in terms of having, they're having more depressed mood, they may then be more likely to then use social media too, or use it in a way that might, make it worse or exacerbate the symptoms or the feelings that they're having. And so for us, when we're looking at these questions, we want to just first understand, like, how are teens using social media in a way that maybe we can then, create evidence-based or science-backed, policies and guidelines, and even like programs that can help teens use social media in a way where they can self-regulate their own mood or own use of it. So they recognize like, oh, I'm using social media at a time when, it's actually making me feel worse right now. I'm going to, hit pause on this, or I'm going to engage in some mindfulness behavior, or I'm going to, maybe just take a break. So that would be like one thing that we're thinking about. And my graduate student, Missy Dreyer, is really excited about exploring that as a potential kind of program. And then also for us, I think first, just like, how are people using it? And when does it make them feel good? When is it making them feel bad? And we know it's doing both, right? At different times for every person. And so one of the things is like, is there sometimes are we using it in a way that it affects our sleep? And that is something we know that sleep is so important for mental health and well-being, that might be one thing that we're like, maybe that's a place where we actually can make, better guidelines or policies or treatments to actually target these things and integrate them in care so that, we're using science to back the things that we're doing with teens versus just kind of making decisions when it's not necessarily backed by the science yet.
So I'm in love with you guys already. Um, oh, also for those watching, I have on my Rutgers, the Hamilton Lab teen advocate shirt, mental health advocate shirt. We
Yay.
2 weeks ago, I joined the Hamilton Lab for an awesome discussion. It was very eventful where I got to meet Dr. Jessica Hamilton, and now here we are today.
Yeah, thank you so much for one repping your shirt. And thank you for coming to the event too. That is, I think, just, we're talking about research and, our studies at this like one level of things, but really it's like working with teens that has been so important for the work, right? I'm an adult. I recognize that even though I try to pretend I'm not sometimes. And I use social media too, of course, but like my experiences are as an adult. And so for me to do research with teens, I need to work with teens. And I think that's the biggest thing that one of my big soapboxes about researchers sometimes is that we kind of stay in our, quote unquote, ivory towers and don't really work with the people we're actually like hoping to help and work with. And so we've been doing a lot of really cool work and getting to meet teens and work with teens and think about ways that we can like make changes right now while we're still waiting for some of the science to come out. With like within the context of what works for each teen, what they know about their schools, like really their own experiences driving kind of the change that we want to see with them. So yeah, we hosted the Teen Mental Health Empowering Teen Mental Health Advocates Day. And it was really fun. I had a great time. And it was your birthday too.
Yeah. I have a question about the Hamilton Lab, and we'll get more into that later. But being that this question goes along with what we're talking about now, you guys have a teen advisory board. So how far across, like, is this like a state advisory board, or is it more expanded throughout the country?
Right now, the RISE team, the Research, Innovation, Support, and Education team, our RISE team is our teen advisory board that is specific to New Jersey. And that was something that I decided when I started out, again, like 2 years ago, in wanting to, one, get better know as being new to New Jersey myself, like, look at the teens of New Jersey, the people I'm going to be working with, and really learn about the kind of like what's going on here in the high schools, and so we have one student from kind of different high school. So we have currently about 14 high schools represented from mostly central, northern, a little bit southern, starting to expand a bit. This is our second year of the RISE team. And so it's cool that we're starting to get our name out there and where people are reaching out to us because they're interested in joining or, really want to get involved. And yeah, right now it's just specific to New Jersey. But I am part of another youth advisory board team with some of my colleagues and friends where we work with teens more nationally as well. So the one with New Jersey is where we're kind of like working with them more regularly with like monthly meetings and then also supporting mental health initiatives that they're leading in their schools and communities as well.
Nice, nice. Now, when you mentioned the name of your advisory board, it brought up another question. Now, you are very fond of acronyms.
I was laughing about that as I was saying it. I was like, yep.
So, can you tell us about the Hamilton Lab name?
Yeah, as I rep my hat, we like also like swag, so that's a thing. Yeah, so the Hamilton Lab name. So I obviously my name is Jessica Hamilton, and that's kind of where the Hamilton comes from. But of course, you have to make it a little bit more fun than that. And so we call it the lab where it happens. I am a musical fan in general, and so we love Hamilton the musical. And so a lot of our website and our just stuff around the lab has a lot of Hamilton themed musical theme around it. One example is like Rise Team, but then underneath it's like Rise Up, which is one of the Hamilton songs. There's also like I think it's like, why do you write like you're running out of time, which is under our publications page. So, we try to find fun ways of integrating and really making, I think, like our lab fun, our research, we do heavy work. We're working on heavy topics. And so it's important that as a team, we're like working together, supporting one another, laughing together as well, while doing this important work. And so I do have like the best team in the world who really make it fun. So yeah, I think that, we do have a Hamilton Lab playlist too. There's some Hamilton music on there, but it's not just Hamilton musical music.
So you've received quite a few awards and publications. So you're very experienced. So can you give us a piece of advice that you would give to any young adolescent?
Yeah, I think let's see, in terms of, I think, the big thing is this is a really good question. I think to me, not chasing things because it's what other people tell you should do, or because it will get you awards or things like that, but like doing work that you really care about and that is important to you. Because honestly, like the awards feel nice sometimes, right? Like it's great to get rewarded for something, but those are kind of fleeting rewarding moments. It doesn't, like, that's not what sustains me, that's not what like keeps me in this field. So I think that that's where, while it does feel nice, of course, to get recognized for the hard work you're doing, I think doing the work for the right reasons, doing the work that you care about in life because it means something to you, because you want to do something that, speaks beyond, moves beyond just the impact you want to have in the world, and that can look different for different people. And that's really what led me into research too, is like I wanted to have a broader impact, not just direct clinical care, which is so important and such important work, but I really wanted to impact, hopefully, over time, policy, bigger picture things that can have an impact on people's lives on a day-to-day basis and on a bigger scale. And so that's really what drives a lot of the work we're doing too, is thinking about that big picture. We really want to like make things better, and that's what drives me. And so when it is nice to get rewarded, of course, but it's, I think, doing the work that moves you, that you feel inspired to do, is really what's sustainable in life and rewarding.
Nice. So what first led you to, get involved with clinical psychology and research?
Yeah, I think, honestly, I'm an inquisitive person, right? Like I'm always kind of asking questions since, I was a kid. And I've always wondered, kind of why things are the way they are in certain things. And it was actually a big moment for me when I realized, like, as a kid or as a young person, that like we don't have it all figured out. In some things you feel like, oh, like you sit in school and they tell you these are the facts, this is just the way it is. And then you're like, wait a second, that's actually like not entirely the whole story. Or, you look at it and you're like, I remember asking someone, why does depression increase in the teen years? And they're like, oh yeah, we're still trying to figure this out. And that was like for me a big aha moment of like, wow, you mean we don't have it figured out yet? We don't. And we're like, no, if we had it figured out, we wouldn't see increasing rates of depression. We wouldn't continue to see increasing rates of stress and teens feeling burned out. So there is so much more room to grow. And I think that's what inspired me to pursue this field, was recognizing that I had questions that we didn't yet have the answers to. And I could be part of the, not like solution, but part of thinking about how we can strategize to improve things. And that's where I love research. It's so fun to like be able to ask these questions that how it can have an impact, um, and get to do something to learn and really like better the field. And that's the part where I think research fails a little bit currently, is that it like just kind of ends there in the publications and it doesn't then try to take it one step further. And that's really what like I love about the team that I have around me, is we all really think it's like, great, you got a publication. And now what? And now what do? We always are asking the like, and why does this matter kind of thing with our work.
Nice. Well, it's time to move more into talking about your team. So can you tell
Mhm.
us why you decided to become the head of the Hamilton Lab? What's the main goal behind it?
Yeah, so I think, as I was saying, like our main goal, well, I knew I wanted to have as I was, working through my career of, I finished grad school, then was doing a postdoc, which was a few years after grad school. The goal was to be in this kind of a position where I got to work with people and train them. So I think there's several goals. One is to do research, as I was saying, to better understand, factors that not just affect and negatively affect teen mental health and suicide risk, but really also work to improve mental health in teens. So that's kind of the research goals I was talking about. But as part of that, like being the team leader and being the director of the lab and the founder or whatever, it's nice to have like I'm training people to then ask their own questions, so that's actually like what's one of the things that is so exciting and fun for me is getting to work with people at all stages. So high school students, college students, obviously my PhD students who are similarly on this path of knowing that like they want to ask these questions to improve the field and then also do different things with them. Maybe it's create prevention programs, maybe it's pursue policy. Um, and that's actually Simone, one of my grad students, was just in DC a few weeks ago, like meeting with people in Congress to like think about mental health. And that's something I see as a big picture goal of our work and our team. So part of the lab and the mission is to train people to like recognize one, that they can ask questions and they have important questions that need to be asked, that we don't have it all figured out yet. And my goal is to help train them to be able to give them the tools so that they can ask those questions in a way that will have real impact on people's lives, kind of at different levels, right? Depending on what their goal is. So I think that's one of the biggest pieces of what I'm trying to do is to train people, to give them the tools that I've learned over time and work together really sometimes to just, figure things out, since I also don't have all the answers either, and I think that's recognizing my own kind of like I'm still growing and evolving. So when we think about the lab, that's like the key word I would say is it's evolving. It's going to look different in a year from now and in 5 years from now and in 10 years from now. And if I'm doing things right, it will always be evolving because I don't want things to just stay still and like, and not grow and evolve. So yeah, that's one of the goals.
I love it. I love it. Well, this concludes our discussion. So thank you for joining us here today on New Jersey Youth Talks Back podcast. And I look forward to discussing with you more.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I hope that we get to work together sometime to work on some teen mental health initiatives.
Yes. All right. Well, have a good day.
You too.